Somewhere in a filing cabinet in a county office in Ohio, there is a folder. It has a name on it. Gary Siders Sr. or Christina Siders, or maybe both. And inside that folder, there's an address. 182 Ohmer Road, Hamden, Ohio. And there are payment records, monthly, regular, consistent. The kind of records that a functioning government benefit system generates when it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do, providing assistance to elderly residents who need it, tracking disbursements, processing renewals, maintaining contact. The state had that address. The county had that address. Somewhere in that system, someone was processing paperwork with 182 Ohmer Road on it. Not once, regularly. And nobody knocked on the door. Now, I want to start there, with the folder, with the address, with the monthly payments, because I think it's the detail in this case that gets the least attention and deserves the most. Not because it's more shocking than what investigators found inside that house. It isn't. But because it points to something that the discovery on June 30th doesn't answer on its own. Something that the criminal charges against the 4 defendants don't address. Something that a conviction, whenever it comes, won't resolve. How does a state benefit system send payments to an address for years and never generate a welfare check on the people living there? That's the question this video is about. Not Gary Siders Jr., not Elizabeth, not the 4 criminal defendants who have all pleaded not guilty and whose cases are working through the legal system. That conversation is happening, and it deserves to happen, and it will keep happening as the grand jury convenes and the proceedings develop. This is about the system, the one that had the address, and never knocked. Let me give you the foundation, the verified facts reported by ABC6 Columbus and confirmed by Vinton County Prosecutor William Archer at a press conference. Christina Siders and Gary Siders Sr. were receiving state benefits at the time of their arrests on June 30th, 2026. Archer confirmed this directly to reporters when asked how the family was making income. His exact words, "Grandpa and Grandma were the only ones I'm aware of that were receiving state benefits at the time of this incident." He did not specify which benefits. He said it could have been Social Security, food stamps, or another form of state assistance. Those are different programs with different administration structures, but they share a common feature. They all require an address. A physical, verifiable address where the recipient lives. That address has to be on file with whatever agency is administering the benefit, and changes to that address have to be reported and processed. In Ohio, state benefits are administered through the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services at the state level and distributed through county departments of Job and Family Services at the local level. The family lived in multiple Ohio counties over approximately 18 years. Whatever benefits Christina and Gary Sr. were receiving, they were being administered through the county systems of the counties where the family lived at any given time. And those same county departments, the same agencies responsible for administering benefits to residents, are also the agencies responsible for child welfare oversight in Ohio. The Ohio Department of Job and Family Services has 2 functions that are relevant here. It sends benefit checks, and it runs child welfare services. Same department. 2 completely separate tracks. And somehow, across multiple counties, across approximately 18 years, those 2 tracks never intersected for this family. Let me explain what I mean by that, because I think this is genuinely complicated and I want to get it right. When a family is enrolled in state benefits programs in Ohio, there is typically a process of verification. You have to establish that you are who you say you are, that you live where you say you live, and that you qualify for the benefit you're receiving. For Social Security, that verification runs through the Federal Social Security Administration. The state and county are largely just distributing payments that come from a federal system. For SNAP, food stamps, the county agency does do eligibility verification, including confirmation of address and household composition. Household composition. That means who lives in the house. If Christina and Gary Sr. were enrolled in SNAP, and we don't know for certain that they were, Archer didn't specify, then at some point, some form of household composition was documented. Whether the case included just the 2 of them or reflected the larger household is something the state's review would potentially reveal. Because here's the thing, the Ohio Department of Children and Youth, which is part of the same state administrative structure as Job and Family Services, has already announced a review of its records related to this family. Jody Norton-Trimble, speaking for the Ohio DCY, confirmed publicly that the department has begun reviewing child welfare records involving this family while they have been living in Ohio. The review is described as consistent with what the department does in all child fatality or near-fatality cases. Review of child welfare records, implying that there may be records. That's a significant statement. Because if there are child welfare records involving this family, if at any point in 18 years across multiple Ohio counties, someone filed a report or a concern was documented or any contact occurred between this family and the child welfare system, then the review will find it. And the question of what happened after that contact will become part of the public record. The state has not confirmed what those records show. The review is ongoing. What we know is that the review was initiated, which tells you that the state believes records may exist that are relevant to understanding what happened and whether earlier intervention was possible. Now, let me step back from the government benefits angle for a moment and look at the broader landscape of systems that had some form of contact with this family across 18 years. Because benefits are one thread. They're not the only one. Jacqueline Yahn is an associate professor at Ohio University who specializes in rural education and poverty. She spoke to News Nation about this case and said something that I think is the clearest academic articulation of the systemic problem here. She said, when kids are isolated or not participating, you don't have someone who's trained to know the clues. That's the structural reality. The mandatory reporting system that exists to catch situations like this one, teachers, doctors, nurses, social workers who are legally required to report reasonable suspicion of abuse or neglect, that system only works when a trained professional is in a position to observe something. If a family successfully isolates itself from every professional contact that would place trained eyes on the people in the household, the mandatory reporting system has no one to report through. The system is designed for people who show up, who bring their children to checkups, who enroll their kids in school, who interact with the institutional infrastructure of a functioning society in ways that create observation opportunities. When they don't show up, when the children aren't in school, when the pediatrician visits stop or never start, when every system that might generate a home visit is navigated around, the system's ability to catch what it's designed to catch goes to near zero. But here's the part that makes the Ohio benefits situation different from the school and hospital situations. The school system and the hospital system are passive. They can only observe what comes to them. The benefits system is different. The benefits system goes to people, or at least it has the capacity to. When the state of Ohio processes a benefits enrollment, it knows where the recipient lives. It knows at some level what the household looks like, or at least what the recipient has reported about the household. And in theory, the same county agency that administers benefits is also the agency responsible for child welfare in that county. That doesn't mean benefits caseworkers are supposed to conduct welfare checks on every benefits recipient. They're not. The two functions are administratively separate for a reason. Caseworkers administering food stamp eligibility are not trained child welfare investigators, and conflating the two roles would create its own problems. But it does mean that there is an institutional point of connection. A place where information about a family receiving benefits and information about that family's children could theoretically intersect. And the question the Ohio DCY review is presumably trying to answer is whether that intersection ever happened, whether anyone in the system connected the dots between a family receiving benefits and a family with children who weren't appearing anywhere else in government records. The county that administered benefits to Christina and Gary Sr. had their address. The county that would have received truancy complaints about their children also had, or should have had, the ability to look at that family's records. The county that would receive a child welfare report about that household would have been the same county administering their benefits. In Ohio, it's the county that delivers services. The state provides funding and oversight, but the actual contact with families happens at the county level. And the county-level system in multiple Ohio counties over 18 years apparently never generated the kind of cross-referencing that would have raised a flag. That's not necessarily criminal negligence. I want to be careful about that framing. The people administering benefits are doing their jobs within systems that have specific functions and specific limitations. The people who would have fielded truancy complaints had their own processes and their own resource constraints. Vinton County, as Prosecutor Archer pointed out, is one of the smallest and poorest counties in Ohio. The administrative capacity to cross-reference datasets and flag anomalies in the way a larger urban county might is not the same. But the gap exists. and the Ohio DCY review is, at least in part, trying to map it. Now let me talk about what the Ohio legislature is doing in response to this case. Because there are already state lawmakers who have said publicly that this case has exposed failures in the oversight system that need to be addressed through legislative action. State Representative Don Blessing is among those who have spoken most directly. He told NBC4 Columbus that there has to be more oversight. And in a remarkable statement, he said that if it meant repealing part or all of the homeschooling law changes that Ohio made in 2023, he was prepared to support that. That's a sitting state legislator saying the law may need to be reversed. What happened with Ohio's homeschooling law in 2023 is directly relevant to this case. Prior to 2023, Ohio's homeschooling requirements had some basic oversight mechanisms. After the 2023 changes, parents in Ohio could simply declare their intent to homeschool with virtually no requirements for documentation of educational plans or outcomes. The result was a system that gave families near complete autonomy over their children's education with minimal external accountability. In the Siders case, no homeschooling notifications were found for any of the 16 individuals. Vinton County Schools confirmed they had no enrollment or homeschooling records for any of the children. The family wasn't even engaging with the minimal requirements that did exist, which raises a question beyond the legal requirements themselves. Is there any mechanism by which a family's complete non-participation in the educational system gets flagged? Lori Ingram, a former school district employee who has been interviewed about this case, put it directly. She asked, who notified the family that they were required to have those children registered for school? And if they weren't registered for school, when did you notify the school district that you were going to homeschool them? She said, it's not the school's responsibility to go find kids, but it is somebody's responsibility to know if there are children that exist. Somebody's responsibility. The question of whose responsibility it actually is, legally, procedurally, in the Ohio system as it currently exists, is one that the legislature is now grappling with in the direct aftermath of this case. Because here's the thing that makes the educational gap in this case different from just a family choosing to homeschool. These children weren't invisible because they were homeschooled. They were invisible because they weren't appearing anywhere. No school enrollment, no homeschooling notification. No educational records of any kind across any of the multiple Ohio counties where the family lived. The family wasn't working around the system. The system simply never developed a mechanism to notice their absence. In a county of 13,000 people, in a state with 12,016,000 individuals, simply didn't exist in the educational record. Now let me come to what I think is one of the most important details in this entire conversation about system failures, and it's one that hasn't gotten the coverage it deserves. The officer who filed the public indecency complaints against Gary Siders Jr., the complaints that led to the warrant that led to June 30th, was not a Vinton County Sheriff's deputy. He was a special agent of the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation, the BCI. The Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation is a state law enforcement agency that investigates major felonies, environmental crimes, and crimes against vulnerable populations, including children and the elderly. It is not the agency that normally appears on misdemeanor public indecency complaints in a small rural Ohio county. Court records reviewed by NBC4 Columbus confirmed this. The officer complainant on the indecency case wasn't local law enforcement. He was a BCI special agent. Why was a BCI special agent investigating misdemeanor public indecency charges in Vinton County? That question hasn't been publicly answered. There are two possible explanations, both of which have significant implications. The first is that the BCI was already conducting some form of broader investigation into the Siders family before the public indecency complaints formalized in May 2026. The indecency incidents may have been the final step in a larger investigation that was already building. The second is that someone saw the public indecency complaints and immediately escalated them to the BCI because of a suspicion that there was something more significant behind them. That a misdemeanor case involving someone repeatedly exposing himself to neighbors was flagged as potentially indicative of something larger and brought to the attention of a state agency with the investigative capacity to pursue it further. Either way, the involvement of the BCI in what was nominally a misdemeanor case suggests that the discovery on June 30th was not entirely accidental. That someone, somewhere in the system, had a reason to be paying closer attention to that address than the misdemeanor charges alone would warrant. The BCI has a computer crimes division. Former Ohio prosecutor Mark Pete Meyer said publicly that the BCI's computer crimes section was reportedly involved in the investigation. Computer crimes divisions handle digital evidence, devices, communications, online records. They are called in when investigators believe there is digital evidence that bears on the case. The state is not publicly disclosing what the digital investigation has found. What's been confirmed is that the investigation extends beyond Vinton County, involves multiple agencies, and includes the BCI's specialized investigative capacity. That's a significant investigative infrastructure for a case that started with a misdemeanor warrant. Let me now bring this back to the state benefits question, because I think there's a connection between the BCI's involvement and the benefits angle that I want to make explicit. Christina and Gary Sr. were receiving state benefits. That means they were enrolled in a state or county system. That enrollment generated records that established their address, their household status, their eligibility for assistance. Those records exist somewhere in the Ohio administrative system. The Ohio DCY review that was announced shortly after the arrests is specifically looking at records involving this family while they have been living in Ohio. That review could potentially touch the benefits records. Not because benefits caseworkers are supposed to be conducting welfare checks, but because the review is designed to understand the full scope of what the state knew, or could have known, about this family and the individuals in their household. What the review finds, and when or whether it becomes public, will determine how much of the systemic picture we eventually see clearly. These reviews can generate internal reports that inform policy changes without necessarily becoming fully public. Or they can generate findings that surface in legislative hearings, in media coverage, in the kind of public accountability process that this case has clearly set in motion. State Representative Blessing's willingness to say publicly that the 2023 homeschooling law changes should be reconsidered suggests that at least some legislators are prepared to let this process generate real policy change rather than just internal review. Whether the benefit system specifically generates new oversight requirements is less clear. The two functions, benefits administration and child welfare, are organizationally connected through the Department of Job and Family Services, but they operate on separate tracks with separate caseworker functions and separate data systems. Integrating those tracks, creating a mechanism by which a family receiving benefits and having children who don't appear in educational or medical records would automatically generate a welfare flag, would be a significant administrative and legislative undertaking. But this case has demonstrated in the most concrete possible way that the gap between those two tracks can persist for years without anyone noticing. The address was in the system. The check went out. Nobody knocked. And 16 individuals grew up inside a house at 182 Ohmer Road, while the state of Ohio processed renewal paperwork for the grandparents and never put those two facts together. Those 16 individuals are now in therapeutic foster care. The Ohio Department of Children and Youth approved $1 million in state funds to help Vinton County cover the costs of their care and the prosecution. The state that failed to notice them while they were invisible is now spending significantly to care for them once they became visible. That's not cynicism. It's just the sequence of events as they occurred. The resources are real, the care is real, the commitment is real. But the sequence matters for understanding how the system works and where it breaks down. The grand jury in this case has not yet convened. No indictments have been issued. The criminal proceedings against the 4 defendants will eventually work through the legal system and produce outcomes, convictions, acquittals, plea arrangements, something. That process takes time, and it should. But the systemic question doesn't wait for the criminal process to finish. The Ohio DCY review is happening now. The legislative conversation about homeschooling oversight is happening now. The questions about how the benefits system and the child welfare system connect, or fail to connect, are being asked now. And they should be. Because the criminal case, when it resolves, will answer the question of what 4 specific people are legally responsible for under Ohio law. It won't answer the question of how a state with functioning administrative systems that were actively processing payments to an address in Hamden, Ohio, went 18 years without any of those systems generating a welfare check on the people at that address. That question belongs to the policy conversation, and that conversation has started. If you've been following this case and want to continue as the DCY review develops, as the legislative response takes shape, and as the grand jury proceedings move forward, subscribe to Crime Uncovered. We're covering every verified development, the systemic failures, the legal proceedings, and the policy questions this case is forcing into the open. The state had the address for years, and nobody knocked. That's where the systemic conversation has to start.